Okay, and we're live. So, hello everyone. Again, welcome to another Red Cloud webinar. My name is Kobe Kushner. I'm a mining analyst here at Red Cloud, and today we're going to be talking about silver with Orex Minerals. With us is Mr. Ben Whiting, CEO of Orex. He comes from a technical background. He's a professional geologist, over 40 years of experience. He's won several awards for his work. So whenever we have a guest like Ben, I always encourage our viewers to throw the technical questions at him in the Q&A session, and maybe we'll learn a thing or two. Now, Orex is primarily focused on silver in Mexico. Mexico has a long history of mining and is currently the largest silver producer in the world. It's one of the largest producers of gold, copper, zinc, and others. Silver is currently trading around $18.40 an ounce, levels last seen really since mid-2020. Commodities in general have been having a hard time on the back of rising interest rates and a rallying US dollar. Markets have also been extremely volatile over the last couple of years in general, and even over the last couple of weeks, especially with the VIX now approaching 34. We think investors have to maintain their long-term outlook here. Spot prices change, but the fundamentals behind silver really haven't. Most silver does not come from primary silver mines. About 3/4 of silver production is actually a byproduct of other mines. Hence, its production is heavily dictated by prices of other commodities rather than silver price itself. It's also more than just a pure investment vehicle due to its unique electrical and thermal conductive properties. It's also an industrial metal. So not only is it used in things like our cell phone, it's also very essential in clean energy technologies like solar cells and even electric vehicles. So the bottom line is we're going to continue needing more silver, and we haven't really seen significant new supply enter the market. So during today's webinar, Ben is going to provide us with an overview and an outlook, and when he's done the presentation, we'll move on to the Q&A session. Reminder that you can type your questions into the comment box at any time. But as always, we have to run through the fine print here. So during this webinar, forward-looking statements may be made, and I would direct listeners to the forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of the company's corporate deck, which we will see momentarily. For Red Cloud Securities Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on Orex Minerals. And with that, I will now turn it over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Kobe. And Kobe's absolutely right that about half of the use of silver is not in the bullion and coin and jewelry side, but in the industrial side. And so it could be treated as partly an industrial mineral. Gold and silver often occur together, and so different projects sometimes are not in the same zones, but that is one of the things that with Orex Minerals, we will look at both commodities, and if there are some base metals, industrial mineral portions, then we also consider that too. So Orex Minerals, this is our trading symbol REX on the Toronto Stock Exchange. REX is Rex, which also means king. So forward-looking statements, I'll be making that. For one thing, I'm awaiting some assays coming back from our recent drilling program that we've had on the Sandra project. So it takes a team, and you've heard that expression before, but we've had this team together of professionals in the mining sector, both on the financial and technical side. You may see some of these names come up within the Belcara group. There are currently 3 publicly traded companies in this group. We're also the same team that made the discovery in the Durango state for La Preciosa silver gold project that was with Orco Silver, and then sold it to a major. Most recent on this particular list is Tatiana Alva, has joined us, and she is a technical advisor and working intimately with our team on the Orex Minerals projects. You can also see that David Gunning, he's a director of our company. He's a mining engineer from his background. So we do have both a financial and technical side. Basic share structure is we have a strong institutional base. Ingalls and Snyder brokerage accounts out of New York, U.S. Global investors from Texas, Sprott team, that's many of them from Toronto and California. They're all part of the institutional investors with about 65%. Fresnillo Mining is the largest silver mining company in the world. They have a 3% stake because we have a joint venture with them, and they decided to participate with our company in the past. Management also participates in these projects. One thing that's a little different on this screen is that Orex holds a 2% net smelter return on the Barsele gold deposit in Sweden. That seems a little strange for this connection, but Barsele was part of Orex originally, and as a corporate structure, we decided to split Orex into a European side, which became Barsele Minerals, and a Mexican Canadian side, so North American side, which stayed with the Orex Minerals name. The 2% NSR is an asset that is within the Orex portfolio. So the current project portfolio, 3 projects, 2 of them are in Mexico. You'll see the name Fresnillo, which I mentioned, the world's largest silver mining company. Our other joint venture partner right now is Pan American Silver, the world's second largest silver producer. So they recognize that we know what we're doing in an exploration sense. And so we are able to create these joint ventures. We've had joint ventures with Agnico Eagle, with Pan American Silver, with First Majestic, with Hecla Mining, with Goldcorp. You can see the trend there. So we do know these people and can set up the projects. The Jumping Josephine project in Canada, we won't deal with it as much for this one, but it is something that's for sale, and it's an asset that we may want to monetize. So moving into Mexico, Durango is the heart of the Mexican silver trend. You can see the major silver deposits that cut through here. Just to the southeast is the state of Zacatecas, which is where Fresnillo is located. That's the town of Fresnillo and their biggest mining operation. On this map, you can see a little red dot that's called La Preciosa. That's one of our discoveries. North of that is Coneto, so about a 2-hour drive from the city of Durango is the joint venture with Fresnillo. And the up and towards the northwest is Sandra Escobar, which is the Pan American joint venture. Other projects of note in the area, you can see Guanaceví, that's Endeavor Silver. Endeavor Silver also bought from Silver Standard La Piteria, which is also in northern part of Durango. So there are major silver deposits in this trend. We'll start with an overview for the Coneto Gold Silver Project. Beautiful cowboy country. It's a ranching area, a nice little town, and this area is just gorgeous. Coneto Mining Camp is a window of the lower volcanic succession. It's andesites and rhyolites of tertiary age, and it's surrounded by rocks of the upper volcanics, which is more rhyolitic. So the pink areas are the rhyolitic rocks, and this orangey and green area is the host rock for a lot of the traditional type of deposits in central Mexico, in the Mexican Silver Belt. This is where the Coneto Mining Camp is located. So it's 100 kilometers north of Durango. We have 45% of it. We put the deal together initially and brought in Fresnillo as the senior partner. Fresnillo has spent over $6 million in exploration to earn their 55%. And SRK last fall completed the very first National Instrument 43101 resource estimate on this project. Even though it's had a 450 years of mining history, there are still areas that are underexplored by modern methods, and this was the very first resource estimate that's come out on the project. So a few of the drill intercepts, what you will notice is there is some variability from vein to vein as to the ratio, but overall it's about half silver, half gold by value. What I'd like to point out on this sheet is that early mining in the camp was in the upper portions of veins down to about the water table where they didn't have the technology to get very much below that. As you get down, we find that the systems are still intact. In many cases, we've had drill holes that are over 300 and 400 meters down, and we're still hitting the precious metal zones. We are getting some base metal credits as well as you get down into the roots, because you'll often get the zoning of these systems. I point that out particularly in the Durazno and the Santo Nino area. Santo Nino has some very high grade material, and that's about 300 meters vertically below the La Bufa Santo Nino Hill. So these systems are intact beneath a lot of the older small workings that were there. We did metallurgical studies on this project and had excellent metallurgical recovery, average over 93% for gold, with the highest up at 98.5. After 96 hours of these leach tests, silver was still entering the system, and we get the numbers up into the 80s for silver recovery on the project. So there was still some silver going into the leach. That's the positive slope on the silver charts. Okay. So to date, 106 drill holes for 38,613 meters and 12 targets. We have about 50 different targets on the property, but these were the 12 targets that we've worked with. And this is Fresnillo and Orex's drilling that meets the standards for the 43101. This is what the rock looks like. The oxide portions in the upper parts of the veins, so 50 to 100 meters near surface, have surface weathering oxidation. And you can see some assays on this sheet. The bottom sample there is 6.3 grams of gold and 142 grams of silver. This is what it looks like in there. It happens to be a Loma Verde sample. If you're deeper down, you get some textures that geologists really appreciate. This shows that there was some boiling happening. And this particular one is a very deep sample that came out with some high grade silver and gold, but you can recognize that copper, lead, and zinc were coming into the system as well. So your chalcopyrite, sphalerite, and galena are in this with your textures that show the boiling in the quartz veins. So the resource estimates have been done on 6 of the lodes that had sufficient drilling for it. They're fairly steeply oriented and mainly northwest-southeast. Loma Verde is more north-south. And this particular area, it's not finished. So do have a few isolated drill holes, but you can only project the zones where you have enough data to create wireframe models to contain those zones. So the first mineral resource estimate by SRK came out, and if you're thinking in terms of gold equivalent, in here we came up with 538,000 ounces of gold equivalent. If you think in terms of silver equivalent, that's about a 40 million ounce silver deposit. It's a snapshot of where we are at this time with the data that we have. Very good starting position for that. Now, we'll move over to the Sandra project. And the Sandra Silver-Gold Project is a spot with Pan American Silver recently buying out the interests of our previous joint venture partner, which was a junior mining company called Kenesil. It currently stands with Pan American having 60%, Orex having 40% of a joint venture, and Pan American added their claims into the joint venture as well. So it's north of the town of Tepehuanes, a short drive from Tepehuanes, and it's a large land package, nearly 7,000 hectares of property. What I point out in this photograph is a little green dot in the center of it. On that hillside, there are about 65 drill holes. Because we maintain a very careful environmental program, you can't see anything that's showing up there. That you cannot. We did not build roads into these places. We used man-portable rigs. We would skid them in with ATVs, and then we would recover the ATV tracks that go across this gentle hillside with the pine forest. But think of this as a silver-bearing hill, and the mining aspect of it in a future operation of some type would be very, very simple. That would be a very forward-looking statement as well. What I point out here now is what we've just completed, the first 8 holes of the diamond drilling program for 2022. There are 3 basic trends. From northwest to southeast is the main orientation. 4 drill holes go right through the central part of the property. We could call that the central corridor. That's where we drilled 4 of the holes, and another 4 holes with Pan American on the eastern corridor. Down in that southeast area is where the Belarus block is, and the Belarus block is where the resource estimate has been prepared on our previous about 65 drill holes in that particular area. What we have done is we've expanded from Belarus, and it's about a 1.5 kilometers to the northwest. We are seeing similar rock types as we do find at the Belarus project. I don't have the assays for you yet because the assay labs are still a little bit slow. There's still a few samples, batches that have not come in yet, but that should be coming fairly shortly with a release on the results of this drilling program. The Belarus deposit area, this is from the previous drillings in 2015, 2016. You can see that it's right at surface, that it's a thick unit of disseminated silver. That first drill hole in December of 2015 was started from 1 meter down the drill hole, so you get casing, and then the first sample is at 1 meter, down to 62 meters. So true thickness of the units, about 43 meters, working out the geometry, of 359 grams of silver. So just sitting there, beautiful, beautiful results from that part of the project. Within that year, we were able to put out a very first resource estimate. You can see that the cutoff grade was relatively low, and the average grade at 106 grams of silver. There is no gold in this part of the project. There is gold further to the west, but this part of the project is silver dominated. And 33.3 million ounces of contained silver in the resource estimate. What I do have to caution here is that there are some metallurgical issues, that it's refractory in part of it. And so we're going to be handing that task off to our joint venture partners, Pan American Silver, to look at the refractory nature of this material. And they are experienced as miners, so that's one of the things that they will be taking a look at. This is what the cross sections look like for 2 cross sections through that Belarus deposit. Is a horizontal unit with a stripping ratio of less than a 1-to-1 geometry. So from that viewpoint, it would be very easily accessible, and it would be one that if we could expand it and add some sulfide mineralogy, which we're seeing as we head towards the northwest, we'll have different styles of minerals in this same camp that we can work with. This is what the Sandra Escobar or Sandra project mineralization looks like. There are some higher grade portions, as that lower left illustration shows. That would be a crack where the quartz veins formed in that fracture, and that material is over 1 kilogram of silver per ton. But typically, a lot of the material looks like the sample that's in the upper left. It looks like a piece of concrete. And the reason why it had not been discovered at an earlier stage was because it does not have a gossan showing this area. There's no reddish hillside that's exposing the oxidation of, say, pyrite, because there's very little pyrite in this portion of the deposit. But that sample in the upper left, that's 254 grams of silver per ton, and that drill sample just looks like a piece of concrete. So the Sandra project, looking as a vista, where the pickup truck is in that upper portion, you're sitting right on top of that hillside that has the Belarus deposit. But as you're looking towards the northwest, there's the Cerro Rojo. And that reddish hill is a reddish hill for good reason, because there's a lot more pyrite and sulfides as you head in that direction. And that shows that there is a very large, complex mineralogical system that's in place here that will take steps to explore. There is a small artisanal mine by a third party that's located partway towards that red hill. It's called the San Francisco, and in that sample, they're mining sulfides, hand cobbing it, and putting them into barrels and shipping that directly to the smelter. So they pick up the shiny bits and send it directly away to the smelter with no mill being required for that particular portion. Our core shack, the Sandra project, is all set up in a little village, which you can see just to the right of the red hill. And that gives you a sense for the landscape and the infrastructure, the road access for the Sandra project. It's in the silver trend. It's a great place to explore. So finally, I mentioned Jumping Josephine briefly at the beginning. We have a project that doesn't really fit the rest of the projects in the company. We acquired it when we acquired some other projects, when we acquired another company. It has a small resource estimate. It has 64,000 ounces of gold indicated and inferred here. You can see the grades. It's about 40 kilometers north of Teck smelter operations in Trail, BC, not too far from Castlegar. And if there is somebody that would like to take a look at this, it is a project that we may put up for optioning or sale. So mineral resource summary, as it currently stands with our share of various projects, if you combine that indicated and inferred numbers that are here, we have about 36 million ounces of silver that is directly attributable to Orex Minerals as our share of the three projects that have resources. They all have reports available for those. Okay, so we've done the metallurgical tests and the resource estimate for Coneto. SRK has recommended a $6.4 million program. It's being discussed with Fresnillo as we go forward. Mapping and lithogeochemistry on Sandra has been done. The drilling phase of the phase 1 of 2022 for Sandra has just completed the physical drilling part. The sampling and assays are still coming in. We have an active social and environmental programs working with the local communities, and we are interested in putting a new project into the Orex portfolio. I'm looking primarily in the Mexico area where we can use our current facilities and our team that we have down there. So 3 projects, 2 strong mining jurisdictions, good joint venture partners, an established presence in Durango state, and we can work in the surrounding states as well. Strong technical team and connections with consultants, and we've been able to deliver results. So I say to you that there is more to be discovered. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben, for yet another solid presentation. And we'll now start with the Q&A portion of the webinar. Reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can. So I do want to change it up a little this time, Ben. Normally we just focus on the company and the assets, but I want to talk about you a bit. So, you're a CEO, but you're also a renowned geologist. So tell us, where were you working prior to Orex, and some of the awards that you've received along the way?
Um, I have been very fortunate, and I think that working with good teams, as you know, that your colleagues, if you have smart colleagues working with you, it kind of makes your work look better. And so I give some credit to others. I was chosen as Explorer of the Year for my role in the La Preciosa discovery. But I also have work in, I received an Economic Geology Award for research work and discoveries in Manitoba at an earlier stage in my career. I have been part of a discovery team on several different projects. The team that found the McDame deposit in northern British Columbia, that was one of the ones that and I was part of that discovery. If you look at Seabridge in the Golden Triangle of British Columbia, they have the KSM project, Kerr Sulfurettes Mitchell. Well, who put the first drill hole into Kerr? That was me. So it's I have my fingerprints on a few of the of deposits that are of note, and the KSM is now a huge deposit. It's more of an economic construction project than it is a discovery now, because they found so much mineralization. It's just what the best approach is to take for it. I was a professor, as an adjunct professor at Queen's University for 11 years in the Masters of Mineral Exploration program. And yeah, I was chosen as the Distinguished Science Alumnus of University of British Columbia. So that was nice to go back to the graduation ceremonies, put the robes back on, and meet all the new graduates coming out. That was always a nice thing to have that kind of a recognition from your peers that come through. And more recently, for my volunteer work and my military service and helping veterans, I received a knighthood as a Knight Chevalier of the Order of St. George. So you can see I've done a few things along my career.
Yeah, that's quite a resume there. I did not know about the knighthood, and I didn't know you were a professor at Queen's. Um, for all I know, you could have been my prof had I studied geology instead of mining. So what is the Belcara Group, and how did you get involved?
Um, I think the Belcara Group is a group in the Belcara is a neighborhood in Greater Vancouver, and it's where Gary Cope, the previous president of Orex, has his house. And we were having a barbecue there, and a group of us were saying how much we liked working together, that we should form sort of a management team and work with several different companies and create companies. And we needed a name for it. Well, watching the ocean sunset on Vancouver Harbor from the Cliff House in Belcara, it seemed like a pretty good name for it. So we called it the Belcara Group. I was originally called down to set up some exploration programs. While I was at Queen's University, they asked me to go down and design some exploration programs for them in Mexico. But I knew many of the team from before then, from our exploration in Bolivia. So I'd worked in Chile and Bolivia and Peru and Venezuela previously. So my comfort level in Latin America was high. And turns out that Gary Cope had one project in northeastern Bolivia, and I was working on the neighboring project, and we used the same airstrip. So going back into those days, that was in the 1990s. We were neighbors, and so you start to get to know, thinking, well, when you need somebody with talent and connections and drive, then certain people you recognize, you say, well, come on. And they made me an offer to join the team. So I left the university and moved back to British Columbia, because I have family here. And the team itself has people like Art Freeze, who's long term connections with Cominco and Tech and Goldcorp, and he was a consultant for Goldcorp's evaluation team, and so he's part of our technical side. I mentioned Tatiana Alva. She's mid-career, about 18 years experience with a degree in Peru, but also did her graduate work in Canada. So fully bilingual, very well respected in her field, and she joined us just this past year. Um, these are the kinds of people that we like to have. Carla is the chief financial officer, and she was previously with Davidson and Company and worked in the auditing systems and financial reporting. And so that's how you build a management team, and you can spread it out amongst several junior companies that way. So that your overhead for that level of expertise is lower per company.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. There's same office, I imagine, just synergies with to spread out your G&A. I want to touch on the elephant in the room, which of course is markets. I'm seeing companies put out absolute smokers of drill results, and their stock price goes down. Things just aren't making sense anymore. And I imagine for these CEOs, it could be demotivating to have done all this great work and then to have it not reflected in your share price. So what I'm seeing is a lot of companies starting to shift their focus to whatever is hot, exploring for whatever commodities it can get financing for. If you were a different CEO, then I wouldn't be surprised if if you started exploring for pegmatites on your projects and changed your name to Orex Lithium, but you're Ben. So in these markets, if they persist, will they cause you to change your strategy? And how do you maintain your focus? How do you maintain that discipline in times like today?
There are some subtleties, and you mentioned lithium. There really isn't a shortage of lithium in the world. If you look at the overall lithium potential, both in the areas, say the evaporite pans in South America, or where you're dealing with one style of lithium, you got lithium in clays in Nevada and Mexico. You've got lithium in pegmatites in Canada, where if you remember your mineralogy, it would be spodumene and lepidolite are some of the lithium-bearing minerals there. There's not a shortage. There might be a shortage of lithium in processing capacity is really what the biggest shortage is in the world right now. I'm not thinking that we should be looking for lithium, but you always look for opportunities. And that's why we ended up with the gold project in Sweden at one time. Why would a Mexican based company end up with a gold project in Sweden? That came along and it was an opportunity we didn't want to pass up. So if somebody had a project in another jurisdiction that we thought was a reasonable jurisdiction, like if you can pick jurisdictions that you don't want to go to but have great geology, like Balochistan, the western part of Pakistan, has great copper and gold potential, or Waziristan. Am I going to move the company to a target like that? No, Waziristan is where Osama bin Laden was caught. But the geology would be great. That's absolutely great. In Afghanistan, just to the east of Kabul, there are some really nice pegmatites. You want some rare earth elements, that would be a place to look. But I'm not going to put shareholders' money and the risk of my team in a place like that. But if a really good opportunity came up and it seemed like Orex could benefit from it, then certainly we would consider it.
Okay.
Does that make
So
sense?
yeah, no, it sounds like as long as it could make value, you're open to it. But for right now, you're sticking with what you know, and sticking with what makes sense for Orex and your shareholders.
Well, I did cut my teeth early in porphyry copper systems. And so a lot of research that I did in that. And I worked for Rio Tinto. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and all of us got sent up to the Highland Valley, Highmont and Lornex and those places to learn how to log drill core and to evaluate projects. So it's not just about silver veins in Mexico, because I have worked in about 30 different countries. And
Right.
so you look at the right opportunities. It's really about the shareholders, because what are their expectations? How can you add value and create a bigger piece of pie? Because a speculative investment is not the same as a gamble. Gambling, the people put in their money, somebody wins and most people lose. A speculative investment in exploration is you put in the money and you hope to make the pie bigger so that you could effectively have everybody that put in money become winners of that scenario.
Right. So, how much cash are you guys currently working with?
Good question. We're sitting at about $2.4 million are still in the cash accounts. You probably are aware that some companies are working off of fumes, and that can be a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't want to be at that stage. We would like to do a financing before we are at the vulnerability of running out of cash and not being able to maintain our projects and our tax requirements, things like that.
Right. And I imagine it helps having partners with deep pockets that are funding some of your exploration work.
It does. It does mean that when we look at our budgets for Sandra, we have to come up with 40% of the money. We are the operators of that project, but 60% of it is paid for by Pan American.
That's an interesting point because usually I see partnerships where the majority owner does the operating, but in the case of Sandra, you're the minority owner and you're the operator. So how did that happen, and what's it like working with majors like Pan American?
I found Pan American to be an excellent company. They have some very good technical people. They have some very good financial people as well. The president of Pan American right now is Michael Steinman. He's a geologist by background. The chairman of the board was Ross Beatty, and Ross Beatty was a couple of years ahead of me at the University of British Columbia. And so I've known him from before he was a billionaire. So when he was
Mhm.
a student, just like the rest of us at that time. You've got people like Steve Busby, who's a chief operating officer. He was a metallurgist, and that's his background. And he's the one who will be taking a look at some of the materials, his team, for the Sandra project. In the exploration side, they have a very good guy, Chris Emerson, who's got a lot of experience in Latin America. And so, with those people, they're colleagues and friends in the industry. So, while their priorities and their timing takes longer, working with their lawyers takes longer. Right, which I think that's just a factor of life in any industry. That the bigger the company, the longer lawyers seem to take. Uh, but but that just goes with scale, I guess. But as far as an overall team, I highly recommend Pan American Silver as a partner to work with.
And how did it happen that you guys wound up being the operators of this?
I think it was because they recognized our talent in the local area. They recognize that we know the stratigraphy, we know the people, we know the communities, we know how the ejido councils work. Ejido councils are like a fourth level of government in Mexico. And then, so you have your federal government who has control of mineral rights. You have a state government, in this case, Durango, would be the next level. You have a municipal government level, which would be Guanaceví on one side of the project, and I guess towards the other side, you're into a municipality to the south, and then you have ejidos, which are a farmers collective that go back to the end of the Mexican Revolution of 1910. So in the 1920s, these ejido community councils were created, and unless you're aware of them, you just there are companies that have gone in thinking they have all the paperwork done, but then they face an ejido council who decides to block the road. And if you don't know that that's a very important level to be negotiating with, then you could run into a lot of social problems. And Pan American Silver recognizes that we had a lot of connections in the local community. We had the infrastructure, we had the drilling connections, drillers connections, the assay labs, all knew who we were, and that we could run a program.
So, you mentioned your cash in the bank and how, you'd rather have somewhat of a buffer before you're vulnerable. But you also mentioned how you have potentially a source of non-dilutive funds should you successfully monetize Jumping Josephine. So with that, how about the 2% on Barsali, if I pronounce that right? Are you looking to monetize that?
Picking the right time to monetize it, I think it would be a good one to do. The right time, depending upon the advance of Barsele. Barsele has 2.4 million ounces of gold in shear-hosted orogenic gold deposit, plus a volcanogenic massive sulfide lens on the north side called Nora. So you're in the central Avon and Schirsen zone is the main gold deposit there. And it's right in the Skellefteå trend of northern Sweden. So it's in a mining trend 45 kilometers from another operating mine. So you can see that the infrastructure and the types of work is certainly there. When that project reaches an optimum point, there might be a point at which to sell to either a joint venture partner or to a royalty streaming company that 2% net smelter return. So it is something that I think is of value, and it would be non-dilutive, as you say.
Mm-hmm. So you also mentioned near the end of your presentation that you're looking to put another Mexican project together. Can you give us any hints about this? Is the ground already staked? Are you looking to acquire it from one or several landholders and essentially consolidate a land package? And what kind of target are you looking for in terms of geology?
I would look for targets could be various types. We could go with skarns, polymetallic skarns. We could go with epithermal vein systems, like some of the ones that we've been working on. Those would be fine. Both approaches are worthwhile. We're looking at one right now of bringing together several small concession holders to create a project of a significant size to study as another mining camp, which is exactly what we did at the Coneto project. It was held by a variety of different smaller concession holders, and we managed to get agreement with them all. And when we did that, rather than cash, they asked for shares of Orex at the time. And so we were able to keep the cash position in check. We did dilute, but brought in a project, so that I consider to be a balance when you're introducing a project at the same time as issuing some more shares. And then there are property submissions. There are companies out there that have either are property rich and cash poor, and maybe they would like to joint venture one of their projects, or there are individual landholders, some families in Mexico who own mineral concessions, and they're looking at maybe the next generation are saying, you know, grandpa's property is here. We've had it in the family for 60 years. But we're school teachers, or we're living in Mexico City, and we don't want to be up in the mountains with this mining project. And there are properties like that around. So some fascinating histories to various projects. So Mexico is certainly rich in mineral properties, and in their nomenclature, everything's a mine. So they always talk about, their family's mine. It could be, one hole in the ground that somebody pulled out 5 tons, or it could be something that had a 200-year mining history. And so there's quite a range for what a property is quite often when they're brought to us.
Right.
But by having a presence in Mexico, we're more likely to receive notice of properties becoming available.
Right, for sure. So, with that, I think I can combine these into one question here, and it'll be a good place to end it. So, you just finished up the first phase of your 2022 drill program at Sandra, and you recently put out a maiden resource at Coneto. So, what are the next steps for each project going forward, as well as what are the next bits of news flow you think that are really going to drive a re-rating here for your stock?
The procedures for Sandra will be releasing information on the drilling phase, because we drilled just 8 drill holes in 2,600 meters roughly. But we laid out a program and a permitting for more drill holes than that. So that phase of information will be delivered to our joint venture partners. They do have committees because they are a major company, so we will sit down with their technical committee and discuss the next phase. Timing of those, it's really hard to predict with a joint venture partner, because you're working with their schedule as well as your own. Discussions with Fresnillo will be going on to Coneto, and is Coneto really the right fit in a Fresnillo portfolio? Fresnillo is so big. They are just a mammoth, but very good to capable team, but they operate a lot like a private mining company. They are listed on the London Stock Exchange, but they were a spin-off from Industrias Peñoles. Peñoles companies are part of Grupo Ball. So Grupo Ball owns shopping centers and office buildings and mining companies and smelters and mines, and like that. It is this huge operation. In their case, they do have their schedules and their committees. We're on their list of having another meeting coming up to discuss the future of Coneto. I think it would be a better fit for a mid-tier mining company. So that is something to discuss with them. Do they want to continue with steps of exploration and evaluation of the other targets? Because there's certainly targets. I know of lots of places that I'd like to drill on the property. Or would they say, we have now an asset, it has a value, it has a report. Do we want to place it in another company? And so that's what will happen with the Coneto project. As far as property submissions go, we currently, I believe there are 3 of them being evaluated as we speak, 3 submissions that are on the table. There are past submissions that have been either under review or future submissions that we already know that people are interested in us looking at other projects, whether it be in Nayarit or Sinaloa or Zacatecas, Guanajuato, Durango. Certainly those are possibilities.
Great. Okay, so with that, I think that's a good place to end it. Ben, I want to thank you for joining us again today. It's always a pleasure hosting you.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to the next time we can actually sit down and talk about these projects again.
For sure. And to our viewers online, if you want to learn our thoughts on Orex Minerals, as well as other companies that we watch, we do publish all of our research on our website. It's totally free of charge. A reminder that our next webinar will take place tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Dave Talbot will be sitting down with PurePoint Uranium. Again, that's Wednesday, September 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day.